And welcome to our second lecture on art from Africa, where we will be heading to the Democratic Republic of the Congo and looking at the Kuba peoples. So this is the Nadap, which means portrait figure, sculpture of King Mishe Misheng Mimbu. Sorry if I mispronounced that. So this is one of our earlier wooden sculptures that we're looking at. And so let's look at some of the characteristics of it. So we've discussed how sculptures exaggerate certain features to depict certain characteristics or traits that are valued and idealized in this culture. So what we're seeing here is this cross-legged figure sitting on a base, and what probably stands out to you is the big head. So again, remember, we're creating conceptual, or we're looking at conceptual and expressive art rather than an attempt at realism. And so what we're seeing here is the portrait of a king. And so the larger head is emphasizing that he's intelligent, he's wise, and also let's recognize the facial features with these closed eyes, this calm looking face where he looks at peace. And so that's also supposed to represent where he's not involved with these petty mortal affairs, that he's connected to the spiritual realm as well, that he stands above any pettiness that would be going on, indicating his status. He also is sitting on this seat, this base, and so across much of time, like I said in yesterday's lecture, even back to Mesopotamia, if a figure is elevated above the ground, that also indicates their status. You're not going to see the average commoner or normal person seated or on a base above the ground. So this raised status is also indicated by his raised platform. So he's also wearing lots of jewelry in his particular headdress to indicate his status, his wealth. And if we'll notice right here, this is a drum, and it has a severed hand on it. So think of that severed hand being a power move, and if there's any type of threat that him and his people are ready to act. However, in his left hand is a knife, but he's holding it with the handle facing toward the viewer and the sharp point of the knife facing back. And so that indicates that this is a period of peace, that he is maintaining peace. His role as king is to help maintain peace. But if there is a threat, they'll be prepared. So that knife turned backwards is a symbol of peace. And again, he's wearing all this royal regalia. And so this is an idealized portrait, but again, what we're idealizing is the traits and characteristics of a good king. His right hand is also resting on his leg, and so this is further indicating a non-aggressive manner. So this is a period of peace. He's trying to maintain that for the good of his people. This would have been kept in a shrine with other kings' royal charms, if you will. And it would be sometimes if the king was absent for whatever reason, if he was traveling, this sculpture would act on his behalf. It would act as a surrogate for the king and help to guide the people, watch over them as a good reminder. And again, this is one of the oldest ones in existence that we are aware of. And it would be used to represent the ideals of the king. So also, here's the real king of the Kuba peoples. And what we're looking at is this heavy headdress, etc. And that is supposed to represent the heaviness of his role, that he's aware of the weight of what he's supposed to do. Here's our power figure from the Kongo peoples, made of wood and metal, as you can see. So let's discuss the composition. He's standing in this very alert pose, where he's standing upright, the knees are slightly bent. He has his hands on his hips. He looks muscular, and he's slightly leaning forward, which you could argue is in a pretty aggressive stance if you consider it. If someone's standing up this way and their arms are bent and they're leaning forward slightly like that, it's meant to be aggressive. It's a warning. So these people and numerous peoples that we've studied, they practice the idea of animism, which is where certain objects would be imbued with spirits. Think of like trees having spirits. You may be more familiar with that. If you've seen like the movie Pocahontas, for example, helps to describe the idea of animism, of like the earth having a spirit, of the wind being a spirit, etc. And so in this case, you can also imbue other objects with spirits. And so with this object, what it's meant to do is, well, let's back up. So this is another example of how the whole creation of this object is also spiritual. There's this sculptor would actually be working with the shaman, so the spiritual leader of the community. The shaman is able to access the spiritual world. And so it would be created to help maintain order within the community. So this figure, this power figure, would be called upon as a witness or an enforcer of community affairs. So, in other words, the shaman could call upon this spirit to embody this object, and it would warn people to be cautious of consequences of their actions that are contrary to the community. And so it may be called upon to witness some type of agreement, or it may be called upon to witness some type of consequence to reinforce that. So let's say two people agree to do something. If one of those people, one of the persons backs out of this agreement, then the power figure could be imbued with this spirit, and the spirit of it would then punish the person who didn't stick to the original agreement. And if you'll notice, all these nails, etc., and all these wood, or all the metal that's been stuck into it, that's the metal pieces are embedded into it to document these agreements, any type of vows or treaties or vanquishing of enemies or whatever is going on in the community. And then the nails would serve as a reminder that the spirit would help to reinforce consequences if these aren't adhered to, or if something does something against the community. Now you'll notice this cavity right here in the center. That's believed to have held medicinal matter that the shaman would put in, relevant to the spirit's power. The belly in many cultures represents the soul or life, spirit, and the force of the person. And so here's an example of like a very shamanistic artwork. Notice his headdress. This specific headdress was worn by kings and priests, so this further illustrates his authority. He also has these very sharp teeth. That's, again, to reinforce the threatening consequences if you don't adhere to what's best for the community. So this allows the practitioners and the community to interact with the spiritual world. Okay, here's the female Po mask. Po meaning female. Now she is showing the idealized character traits and values of females. So this is of the Chokwe people, and this is a matriarchal society. And so here, a male would be wearing this mask during particular ceremonies, okay, to respect the females. Before we go into that, now let's remember that whenever we're looking at a mask, we're only looking at a part of the entirety. This whole costume, as we can see here, was a part of the mask and would have been worn to represent females. So during these certain ceremonies, they'd be moving and acting like a female out of respect for the matriarchal lineage. So some of the characteristics is we have this white clay that surrounds the eyes, like the video that you guys watch for the assigned resources, as it helps to illustrate her purity. And she too has her eyes that are slit. They're slightly closed. So think of the Nadat portrait, where she is above these earthly matters, and particularly she's above petty gossip. okay, is that she's not participating in gossip. It does no good for anyone. It just creates tension and dissent and goes against the good of the community. She also has this high forehead and this large head, indicating wisdom and intelligence. And so, some of the other idealized features, her mouth is closed, which is reinforcing that idea that she's above gossip. And in fact, that's the better symbolism over the eyes of being above this earthly petty gossip. Her hair is very elaborate. You can imagine the time it took to create this hairstyle that's been placed atop this mask's head. And so it's showing that she cares about what she looks like and that it's respecting her beauty. She's wearing jewelry. And so she also, this is a pretty symmetrical mask. Okay, so an idealized state. And so this is a female founding ancestry. So it's honoring the female as a female ancestor. It was often buried, so when the dancer, the male dancer to whom the mask belongs to, would die, the mask was also buried. You'll notice here's a close-up, these dots around the eyes, these indentations. That's been arguably described as another example of scarification. And here we go, the female pole mask. Here's the Lukasa memory board by the Luba peoples. So this is a very functioning object, and this is for shamanistic use as well. So it's in this hourglass shape, and it's adorned with beads and shells and metal. The back of these different types of memory boards also are supposed to represent the shell of a turtle. And its functionary use was a shaman would hold it, and this helps to tell the history of the people. Okay, the outside's a turtle shell, and it's associated with this society and these peoples, which were made, so the Mubaide society, which the Luba peoples were a part of, have these councils of men and women, and they help the king and the chiefs maintain order and discipline. And so they also interpret political and historical aspects of the Luba society to help one of those, the past repeats itself, or how can we learn from the past? And so they help to reinterpret the past to help with the present. And so with these, they'd be rubbing their hands against it, and each of these little parts indicate something specific, be it some type of battle or some type of kingship lineage or a migration to a different area, etc. Court ceremonies, heroes of their history, and genealogy. So it helps the readers to remember key elements. Notice how he's holding it in his left hand, and he's using his right index finger to read it, if you will. So he's pretty much this court historian, and where he's able to help interpret the past to help the future. And this is a mastered skill, that they have been taught this and that it's passed down how to read this. Let's head to Nigeria, where we're looking at the Ikenga shrine figure of the Igbo peoples. So figures like this were for personal shrines of the Igbo people, some of the Benin people. In the right hand, we have many of them. So in the right hand, what you're holding is a tool or a weapon, okay, for making sacrifices, conducting rituals, and some type of alert to speak at a public forum. but it's some type of tool, be it a weapon, a tool for order, or a tool for other means. And Ikinga means strong right arm. So that's why we're seeing an important tool in the right arm. It's also the hand of accomplishments, confronting and overcoming life's challenges, and so it's this hand of action. Okay? So there's this physical prowess to this object, to this shrine figure. And it's supposed to help to communicate these ideals of strength and potency that males are supposed to have. Notice how some of them are also seated to indicate their higher status. And then what we have on the left side is often a trophy head. Okay, so again, this idea of power, of conquering. Those who have been conquered. And so when a person comes of age, there's this really potential for their life to be successful. And so we have this mix of human, animal, abstract forms, etc., all of this combined together. And it tells of the owner's morality, and it's a means of also communicating hopes for their prosperity, future achievements. It reflects upon the genealogy of that person, and it indicates the social rank, such as these seated ones being likely of a higher status. And so it's this part of a rite of passage, in other words. Consider the horns, help to reinforce this idea of these masculine ideals, of this dominance, of this action. And if a man achieves more success, then he may commission a more elaborate version of the Ikinga figures. And it's maintained in his home, but destroyed when the owner dies. Now, if it's not destroyed for whatever reason, or let's say it's a family that doesn't have the means to buy a new Ikinga figure for each of the males in their family, then they can reuse it, and that's fine. And offerings and blessings are made to it. During this rite of passage, it would also be imbued with blessings and go through a ceremonial process for this power, the power of this figure to almost come alive to an extent. So it was like consecrated with offerings before members of the community. Oh, and they also vary in sizes. There's some that are even like 6 feet tall. So you can imagine the higher elevated status of that person. But essentially what we're looking at is really like a power symbol, a symbol of prestige. And this is of the that should be there. Okay. So we're looking at Igbo land in Nigeria. And this is an organized, or a community that's organized by a group rather than like a chieftain or a king. Instead, it's organized by these council of elders. That's how they were traditionally ruled. And so we're looking at the veranda post of the enthroned king and senior wife. The Yoruba's people. So this is a wooden sculpture. It obviously has this tall vertical emphasis. It's elaborate. It's complicated. There's this negative space and openness within the composition. These veranda posts were painted. We do see traces of paint remaining on this one. Like all of these wood sculptures, I should have mentioned, is they would have been often cared for and oiled, etc., so that they wouldn't dry out, like what we're seeing here, or so that also to prevent insects, etc., from having an impact on them. This one has obviously dried out within a museum setting, but originally it wouldn't have looked so dry. And so this was made by one of the most important artists of the Yoruba people. We do know who this one is. And it was carved for one of the rulers of this kingdom, Ekti Yoruba. And so what we're looking at here is the king with his wife, his senior wife. He had multiple, but this is his most important one, and some attendants below, as well as a god. And so here we have, on the bottom, well, let's acknowledge how he's shown his elevated status, because he's sitting on a chair, so he's above the ground. His feet are above the ground because of his elevated status. And so what we have here is an attendant kneeling before him. And we have Ishu, the trickster god, where he is ready to defend the king. He's this trickster god. He'll play tricks on other people if they attempt to defy him, etc. There would have been a third figure, a fan bearer. That was often, think back to our equestrian statue of our king of Benin, but that has been lost, unfortunately. And so notice the hierarchy of scale, where the wife seems extremely large, and that doesn't indicate that she's more important than the king in this regard. Instead, it indicates the high status of the wives of the kings and of females in general in this society, and that she's behind him, that she has her hands on the throne, that she's helping to protect him, that she's there for counsel, she's helping him guide the people, essentially. Notice the high conical crown with this bird atop it. So that helps to symbolize his supernatural abilities. The long-beaked bird is also associated with females, so it helps to reflect upon the female ancestors and deities, which the Yoruba peoples would describe as our mothers, which help to guide them. The height of the crown also reaches toward the heavens of the spiritual world. And in the senior wife, during the coronation process, she would also place the crown atop his head from behind him. So that was an important part of that ritual. And this we do know, like I said, some of the provenance, the background of this one, so the artist, and we also know that it was in the inner palace of the courtyards of the king in this region. One of several that have been carved.